After nearly 2 years of working on the conversion of a 2010 International School Bus, it's probably time for a bit of a recap. I purchased this bus in the spring of 2022 and began with the disassembly throughout that summer. As soon as the seats were out, I hit the first obstacle. 12 sections of 100-inch L-track, through-bolted every 4 inches. Do the math real quick, and we're talking about 300 fasteners. I immediately realized that none of these bolts were going to unthread and would need to be cut or drilled out. I began beneath the floor, cutting as many as I could reach with the angle grinder. Those that couldn't be reached from below had to be drilled out. It was a frustrating process, but necessary, since I wanted to preserve the tracks for reuse later. Once the tracks were out, I pulled up the vinyl flooring, plywood subfloor, and heating lines that snaked in and out of the body of the bus. Next, I prepped the floor with a rust inhibitor, painted with a Rust-Oleum oil-based metal primer and paint, covered holes with flashing, and framed the exterior with 2x4s ripped down to 1-inch thicknesses. Inside of the 2x4 framing, I glued panels of rigid foam board insulation. On top of that, I glued Advantech 3/4-inch tongue and groove subfloor. At this point, I had a serious decision to make, whether to raise the roof or not. Although it was going to add a boatload of work to the project, I decided it was the right thing to do, so I began planning out the process. I decided to raise only the center section of the roof, since this would avoid having to work around either of the AC units or the rear door and liftgate. To start the process, I removed all the windows except the last 2 and built 4 lifting guides. These guides were welded at each corner of the roof, acting as jacks to help keep the roof even as it was raised 16 inches total. Once the roof was at its intended height, I began attaching sections of hat channel to reconnect the ones I'd cut. I had a local sheet metal shop cut and bend these channels for me. Since the shop I work for does business with this vendor on the regular, having them custom make the channel sections was actually cheaper than buying them from Skoolie.com. The next challenge was transitioning from the stock roof to the raised section, then back down in the rear. In the front, I made cardboard templates to get a rough shape, then started with the side panels. I tacked them in place, then heated with an oxyacetylene torch to help make a smooth bend to fit the profile of the roof. After the side panels were welded in, I moved to the center sections, which required less bending. In the rear, I made a straight transition, which only required 1 large panel. Handling the panel by myself was a bit of a challenge, but anything's possible with enough clamps and straps.
God damn it!
Skinning the sides of the bus came next. I had the same shop that fabricated my channels cut the sheet metal panels, with bends to the rear of each sheet, where they'd lap onto the next. This wasn't absolutely necessary, but I figured it was worth the effort, especially since the sheet metal shop had no issue with this simple bend. I also had them pre-cut the holes for windows.
Alright, grab that little green thing. There we go.
With the help of a few friends, we had all 6 panels in place over the course of a day. I bolted them in place for the time being, then came back later to drill and rivet them, using lap sealant between all surfaces. After that, I created a bump out above the bathroom for placing a max air fan. I fabricated a box and welded it into place, then trimmed the box to match the profile of the ceiling inside. Once that was complete, I had a few exterior accessories to remove and patch. Then I spent a 19-hour day prepping and painting the entire roof with a white rubberized bed liner. Although advertised as roll-on, it was immediately obvious that I'd have to hand brush it on in order to spread the textured glop evenly. It was a frustrating day, but I had to finish it since the bus needed to be out of the shop by Monday morning. With the bus back outside, sealed from the elements and no longer wearing a cover of gray tarps, it was time to move inside. First thing to do? Cut into it. I installed 2 max air fans in the roof of the bus, one in the bump out above the shower, and another at the front of the bus near the kitchen. Once they were in, I began framing the walls and ceiling with 3/4 inch plywood ripped down to 2.5 inch strips. The walls feature 2 courses of this strapping to create a total depth, including the hat channels, of 3 inches. The roof only has 1 course of strapping, totaling 2.25 inches of depth. I'll be using spray foam insulation, so all wiring must be run inside of the walls ahead of time. This detail has probably been the most design intense, since fixing any mistakes or adding forgotten wires will create a serious headache. And that's where I am now. A series of surgeries has forced me to break from working on the bus, but also allowed me the ability to catch up on documenting it. Make sure to subscribe and follow along with this project as it continues.